We begin with news that involves one of Donald Trump's most controversial and loyal aides, the speechwriter and polemicist who began the Trump era pushing that immigration crackdown and was later reined in by the courts. Well, he ended the Trump era openly talking up a plot to steal the election with fraudulent electors. Now, that may be familiar given recent news cycles, but I want to start here tonight to show you this all began and was actually seeping out in little ways into the public days before the insurrection. That's when Stephen Miller began one of the first confessions of the tactics that would later amount to a thwarted coup. This was the time when Giuliani was giving weirdo, bizarre press conferences. The courts had cut off most avenues of any kind of challenge. So at the time, it might have sounded like more puffery and rhetoric from this ship of fools that was going down a legal ocean. But in fact, I bring it back up tonight because, well, Stephen Miller's under a lot of pressure tonight. And the fact is, he was actually admitting specific tactics then, days before January 6th, about their plot to overthrow democracy. Listen here to the reference to alternative electors.
We have more than enough time to right the wrong of this fraudulent election result and certify Donald Trump as the winner of the election. As we speak today, an alternate slate of electors in the contested states is going to vote, and we're going to send those results up to Congress.
As we speak, alternate electors. If you don't watch Fox and Friends, and that wasn't how you were spending that early January morning, you might have missed it. And it didn't happen. There was not that formal submission of a bunch of alternate slates of electors. If there was, I bet we'd all remember it. But what Miller admitted there matters. It shows how far he would go for Trump. And it was not until many, many months later that we learned how serious that fraudulent electors plot was. More on that in a moment. Miller's in the news right now because he's testifying to the January 6th committee about all of this. That's another victory for Congress. They were able to end Miller's initial attempt to try to defy the committee, which included a lawsuit against its request for his phone records. But now, like so many others, he is cooperating. Investigators are probing his, quote, efforts to encourage state legislatures to alter the outcome of the election, a.k.a. steal it, by appointing, quote, alternate slates of electors. Now, that's one of the many tactics in this plot that's only come to view over time. And this matters tonight. This story is now, this investigation is now, and these kind of plots, if not addressed and publicized, will be potentially used again in the future to steal your vote. But we know more about it thanks to the government investigations as well as investigative journalism. And while some of the aides did go on to run from these plots, we have been digging into the scheme of how it was going to work to send in those fraudulent electors and who was involved, because this can be an election crime. Indeed, we always go to the source around here. We talk to all kinds of people in our news gathering. I asked a top Trump aide, Boris Epshteyn, about it, the fraudulent electors, and he admitted to it while quibbling with word choice.
That's so funny. It's not fraudulent electors, Ari. It's alternate electors. Because of the process, again, that's laid out in the Constitution under the 12th Amendment.
Who doesn't remember the old saying, tomato, tomato, alternate electors, election crimes, and coups? Well, call it what you want, but investigators are probing all of this. They're also looking at how Miller actually helped write Trump's January 6th rally speech, which infamously told people to go down to the Capitol to fight like hell. And when you take all these leads together, well, one committee member likens this to a mob-style investigation that will head for the people at the top with evidence that may show crimes that have not yet been alleged. You know, America has faced many failures in the Trump era. The news is full of them during and after. Democracy did hold. Trump did not seize the voting machines or the military. And for self-preservation, he almost always ensured that he would get other people to do the worst things, the most terrible plots, the most dangerous or potentially criminal schemes. You could say many things about him, but whatever it is in his life and business and politics, like other people who have evaded investigators, he did know a thing or two about not acting alone and leaving a lot of evidence pointing back to himself. And that's why so many of these sloppy coup plans did hit those roadblocks. That's why I mentioned to you that democracy held, because when the votes showed Trump's loss and the courts tossed those cases, Mr. Trump, the outgoing president, was left impotently begging Mike Pence or Bill Barr to help a kind of a last-ditch sloppy coup. Well, we know what happened. Pence said no. Barr said no and left, which is why then Trump found himself begging his own aides or former aides, who had far less power than those people mentioned, to, as we're hearing, find some fraudulent electors or run these pressure campaigns on members of Congress. And that is where the Millers and Bannons and the Navarros come in. If there's any doubt, that's why Donald Trump is still out here reliving his anger in his toxic relationship with Mr. Barr, casting the former Attorney General's opposition to do election fraud at the end, which is a low bar for a prosecutor, by the way, just not committing new crimes. Trump now casting that as Barr's fear of some kind of congressional impeachment.
Look, we also had a chance, but Bill Barr, the Attorney General, didn't want to be impeached. Had Bill Barr had the courage to do what he should have done, instead of being worried about being impeached, I said, look, get impeached.
Is that what Barr was worried about? There's actually reporting that Giuliani and Barr were more concerned about criminal liability and jail for Trump and his aides than they were worried about congressional impeachment if some of these things went through. Giuliani famously telling people around the White House that one of the final memos that came in that talked about getting the military to seize voting machines would land them all in jail. Now the DOJ that Barr once led is grinding forward with prosecution of Trump fans and insurrectionists. I could tell you there's a new conviction today, guilty, the verdict for a rioter who had offered that weak defense that he was just following Donald Trump's orders that day. Now, that's one of many, many Trump fans who stormed the Capitol and talked so tough on January 6th, and then found he couldn't hack it when the pressure came. We've seen them turn on each other. Some are cooperating. Some are blaming Donald Trump, their leader himself, for the now convicted crimes that day. And that's one more MAGA convict learning a lesson that Vince Staples once shared. Everybody tough till they got to go and see the judge. On this news night, let's bring in the justice correspondent for The Nation and NYU law professor Melissa Murray. Welcome to you both. Professor, your thoughts?
Well, so much to say, Ari. I'm not surprised at all to see that defendant was convicted this morning. There was some discussion about whether or not blaming this on Donald Trump made me do it, would be availing in some way. We've seen this kind of plea before. As I've said before, there have been those who've been involved in the drug trade and in gang violence who have said that they were sort of lulled in by strong, charismatic figures and made to do these things without their own knowledge or their own doing. And it's all been unavailing. And I think here it was similarly unavailing. Whether it means that Donald Trump will face criminal liability in the future for inciting violence at the ellipse is another matter altogether. And that, of course, is what is the focus of the January 6th Select Committee. And the fact that Stephen Miller is testifying, and we don't know what the subject of his testimony will be, but the fact that he has decided to stop stonewalling and at least provide some testimony to that committee suggests that they are moving closer to that inner circle, and that is progress indeed.